Over the years, the Castlevania series has remained some of my most played and replayed games ever. What started as simple action platformers eventually evolved into full-blown adventures with RPG elements. I was absolutely enthralled with the IP through the 8 and 16-bit eras, and never missed a release. The series hit a rough patch as it tried to find its audience while transitioning to three-dimensional polygons, but even then there remained a strong fan base that defends them to this very day. Konami leveraged the popularity of Symphony of the Night into a long-running portable presence on the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS that gave us 6 incredible titles across just 7 years. Konami would then completely reboot the franchise with Castlevania Lords of Shadows, a retelling of the lore with a three-dimensional engine and many new twists and turns. Needless to say, it's been one heck of a journey, and it got me to thinking that I wanted to go back, replay all the 8-bit Castlevania games that established the series, and pick just one to rule them all. There are 10 8-bit Castlevania games in this episode, and we are going to rate each and every one on a 5-point scale. We will then choose an overall best 8-bit Castlevania as our winner. This one should be incredibly fun, so let's get started. First up is the game that started it all for me, Castlevania for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This was initially released in 1986 in Japan for the Famicom Disk System as Akumajo Dracula, which was then released the following year on cartridge in North America. It was directed by Hitoshi Akamatsu, who loved classic films and drew a huge amount of inspiration from them. You can feel it in every stage, enemy, and boss, almost as if every classic horror film you've ever seen was mixed together in one epic adventure. While the overarching story involves the eventual showdown with Count Dracula, you'll also battle mermen, bats, ghouls, Frankenstein's monster, the mummy, the Grim Reaper, suits of armor, Medusa, and many others. You play as Simon Belmont, a vampire hunter whose family is cursed to face Count Dracula every 100 years or so. The gameplay is mainly action platforming. The stages are linear, though there are some hidden items spread about to help you out. You have a number of ways to attack, starting with your trusty whip. It starts fairly weak but can be upgraded to be longer and stronger. You also have a variety of sub-weapons that can be employed. There are axes, knives, and holy water to be thrown, a magical watch that can freeze time, and a cross that can be used as a boomerang. These items are powered by hearts you pick up from enemies and broken candles. It's all fairly straightforward but incredibly fun, drawn together into something special by its memorable visual presentation and music that would help define an entire generation. It wasn't without its issues, however. Some of the graphics were bland in places, the art was just straight silly on some of the enemies, and towards the end, things started getting a bit cheap with enemy placement, guaranteeing you a rough time. None of these things killed your desire to play it, but they do hold it back a tad from absolute perfection. It's still a 4-star experience and one of the most influential 8-bit titles of its day. Around the same time Castlevania was in development for the Famicom Disk System, Konami was also developing a similar product for the MSX2 computer platform. In Japan it had the same name as Akumajo Dracula, but was renamed in Europe as Vampire Killer. It released just 4 weeks after the Nintendo version, and features numerous changes to the gameplay and design. While the story still follows Simon Belmont on his quest to fell the evil Count, the stages are laid out different, There's a ton more items to concern yourself with, and there are many more hidden areas to find. Because the MSX hardware was weaker in areas, it does not scroll like the Nintendo edition, but is instead single screens that are connected to one another. Aside from feeling more claustrophobic in terms of area you have to defend yourself, it also allows things to feel larger and more explorable than they do in the more linear Nintendo experience. The entire weapon and item system here is also radically different. There are keys to unlock chests. There are items that will boost your abilities like movement speed and jumping. Hearts are used as currency to buy items, and you can replace your whip entirely with the knife, axe, or cross. The visual presentation is a touch stronger than it was on the Nintendo, and the music isn't half bad either. I really love some of the design elements here, and it likely would have made for one heck of a good game if the gameplay itself was any good. It's not, with endlessly respawning enemies popping out to the point where you are sick of it just a few stages in. There is simply no room to fight a lot of times, leading to frustrating damage. The stages also come across as too large, with a fair bit of backtracking, which means you'll be fighting constantly to keep those respawning enemies at bay. It's absolutely exhausting trying to make your way through these single screens and dealing with those endless enemies. There are also no continues, so if you lose your opening allotment of lives, that's it, it's game over. Needless to say, if you want to see the credits roll, it's gonna take some serious effort. This is not terrible by the standards of the day, but when you are comparing it against other Castlevania games, I'm afraid this one is 2 stars at best. In August of 1987, Konami released Dracula 2 for the Japanese Famicom disk system, which was then dropped the following year in North America as Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. The story picks up 7 years after the first. Simon has been inflicted by a deadly curse, and if you can believe it, he needs to resurrect Dracula in order to undo it. The design here shifts from an action platformer to an action adventure. Gone are the linear stages of the first, replaced by an open world that can be traversed at will. You have to be careful though, along with that open world comes a day-night cycle that dramatically shifts the threat. During the days, towns are full of people that can help you, and the enemies in other areas are weak and easy to kill. At night this changes into a full-blown nightmare. Enemies are everywhere, including the towns, and they are much stronger and harder to kill. That cycle isn't there just for the hell of it, because the in-game days affects the ending you receive. The hearts are back to act as your currency to buy helpful items. Your ultimate goal is to find the body parts of Dracula that are hidden away inside deadly mansions, bring the Drac back, and then kill him again. In my opinion, Simon's Quest would easily be the best of the 8-bit releases if Konami had given it a stellar English localization. That didn't happen, and it ended up with clues that made no sense, leading to an adventure that was exceptionally difficult unless you had some form of help or a guide. This takes a potentially 5-star experience and knocks it down to just 3, something I don't do lightly. There is an excellent game here, but it just wasn't released in a state that made the most of it. Castlevania was no stranger to the arcade. The first NES game showed up in Nintendo's Versus series of releases, but in 1987, Konami gave us Haunted Castle, an action game that wasn't based on any previous title in the series. Simon Belmont does make a return, but the stages, enemies, bosses, and everything else are completely new. Dracula shows up during your wedding and steals your new bride, and only you can get her back. Visually, this is quite a bit more detailed than what we had seen on the home platforms, but the art and animation of the main player sprite is laughably bad. The music ranges from just okay to fairly memorable, but gets buried under a sea of frustrating gameplay. Your movement is best described as slow and cumbersome, almost like Simon has a 75-pound weight attached to his back, and he is a complete novice with his whip. You don't feel like a vampire killer at all, and instead struggle to defeat even the most basic of enemies. You eventually adjust to this molasses-laden affair, but it never feels anywhere near as fun or as playable as the home versions. Castlevania's first dedicated arcade release deserved to be so much better. This is 1 star at best. Along with the Nintendo Game Boy in 1989, we received Castlevania The Adventure. We are following another Belmont on his quest to defeat the evil Dracula. This time it's Christopher Belmont, an ancestor of the great Simon Belmont. The basic setup and gameplay was very similar to the games before it, but here you lose the sub-weapons entirely, and hearts are used to replenish your life. It makes for a straightforward action platformer that is perhaps a bit too slow for its own good. Konami likely kept the pace slow to avoid the screen blur that was so prevalent back then, but there is no question it takes a toll on playability. It's got nice visuals and a very impressive soundtrack otherwise, and that nearly makes up for it. No kidding, the feeling of dread here is excellent thanks to the presentation, and I think it helps more than a lot of people give it credit for. It's also a lot bigger than its 4 stages would have you assume. These levels are pretty massive and take a while to defeat. Add in the typical high challenge the series is known for, and you won't be beating this one the first time you play it. For a first effort on brand new hardware, I think it mostly did a solid job. It won't displace the full-size console experience, but I still give it 3 stars for the overall excellent audio presentation and the foreboding atmosphere. Akumajo Densetsu was also released in 1989, which came out a year later in North America as Castlevania III Dracula's Curse. This one takes the series back to its action platforming roots, and focuses on Trevor Belmont and his quest to defeat Dracula. If you're keeping score, it's another prequel that recounts an adventure in this long and storied conflict. To keep things fresh, Konami designed 2 major points of interest here: branching paths and alternative playable characters. During your journey, you will come across areas that allow you to choose different stages. These choices have an effect on which ending you can get and which characters are available to you to play as. Besides Trevor, there is also Grant, a knife-wielding pirate that can climb walls and ceilings, Sypha, a powerful magic user, and Alucard, the son of Dracula, who has the ability to transform into a bat and use fireballs. You can change into your companion at any time, but you can only have one with you at a time. Who is with you at the end also decides your ending. Sub-weapons are back and used like they were in Part 1, and the visual presentation remains in line with the previous NES games, though with a nice increase in detail. The music is another area that was extremely well done, and continues the excellence seen in the other titles. It's worth noting that the Japanese version of this game had an enhancement chip inside the cartridge that allowed for more sound channels, adding some depth to the audio experience missing in the Western releases. Of all the NES Castlevania games released, this one easily looked and sounded the best, and thanks to the addition of new playable characters and those branching paths, it's easily the best on that platform. It landed late in the console's life, but was all the better for it. A 3 megabit monster of a game that is easily 5-star entertainment. 1990 also brought about a spin-off of the Castlevania series called Kid Dracula. This was released exclusively in Japan for the Famicom, and remains so for a very long time. It takes the path of parody, similar to other Konami series like Parodius. It's an action platformer that follows the adventures of the youngster Kid Dracula as he attempts to defeat an upstart demon trying to steal his power. This looks, sounds, and plays quite a bit different from the mainline series, but it's still a fun little side trip in the Castlevania universe. It's not a must-play, but still enjoyable. 3 stars. In 1991, we received another Game Boy entry called Castlevania 2: Belmont's Revenge. It serves as a direct sequel to the first Game Boy title, a tale that has Dracula kidnapping Christopher Belmont's son in a bid to regain his power. It builds on the first release with slightly faster gameplay, a return of sub-weapons, and the ability to take on the 4 core stages in any order you like. I really enjoyed how the gameplay went in its own direction in the Game Boy releases. It trades stairs for ropes, there tends to be a lot more trap-style designs, and there is no shortage of new enemies and bosses. The graphics here see a huge boost in detail and has a lot more going on than the first game. We also get a return of the outstanding audio. It's a better game all the way around and easily challenges the NES releases in fun factor and replayability. The only real area it comes up short in is the length, but that was par for the course with portable games back then. As it is, I still give this a solid 4 stars for everything it gets right, and definitely one of the better 8-bit Castlevania experiences. In 1993, the comical spin-off Kid Dracula received a Game Boy sequel that continues the events that started in the Famicom original. Kid Dracula is out to stop the same demon who now has control over all his minions. This is much a remake as it is a sequel, thanks to a fair few assets and design elements making its way over from the original NES release. Again, the gameplay is fun and the audio is quite nice. It's 3 stars and worth a play. As we got deeper into the 1990s, the Castlevania series made its move into the 16-bit generation. One would assume that the 8-bit titles were done, yet in 1997 yet another Game Boy game was released. Castlevania Legends follows the tale of Sonia Belmont, the first vampire killer of her clan. At least that's what Konami had originally meant to be the story. It has since been removed from canon and stricken from the record book like it never existed. The ratings for this one were quite poor upon its release. Many outlets remarked that it looked, sounded, and played worse than the previous Game Boy title Belmont's Revenge, and in all truth, they're not wrong. This is a lesser game all the way around, but it's far from the poor experience many would have you believe. This still has some of the same magic that made all these games fun, and though many elements feel sort of half-baked, it retains enough of that magic to be far from a waste of time. I dare even say it was a nice throwback at the time of its release. You won't see it on the top of any must-play lists, but this still gets 3 stars from me and a recommendation to at least try it. Now that we have covered and rated all of our 8-bit Castlevania releases, it's time to pick an overall favorite and the best of the lot. This wasn't quite as easy as I first thought it'd be. The first Castlevania for the NES has an appeal that is incredibly strong all these years later. That soundtrack is epic and the gameplay is virtually timeless. Simon's quest exudes elements that make it an incredible experience itself. That open world and the adventure elements really set the stage for the series to come. It was also impressive to see the Game Boy games grow into something special. Things were a bit rough in the beginning, but the maturation process gave way to an incredible sequel that remains impressively playable. That leaves us with our pick in the best 8-bit Castlevania available, Dracula's Curse. Castlevania 3 did so many things right it's hard to even consider an alternative. Not only did it look great for that aging hardware, but the sound that comes out of that cartridge is nothing short of breathtaking, even without the Japanese version's extra chip. But for everything that it does right from a presentational standpoint, its gameplay is what really shines. By giving you multiple options that play radically different from one another, this is easily one of the most versatile Castlevania adventures even now. The cherry on top is the multi-path stage design and the different endings you can acquire, which just adds a ton to the replay value. And that's why Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse is the best 8-bit addition to that series and my favorite of the bunch. Like my 16-bit Castlevania episode, I want to stress how good most of these games were at the time of their release. So good, in fact, your pick for the best one might be very different from my own. In the end, the only thing that really matters is that we were there to play them, and they are an unforgettable part of gaming's history. I'd also like to take a moment and bring up one 8-bit Castlevania I didn't cover. There was also one for the C64. It makes some changes here and there, but it's otherwise pretty close to the NES release in overall design. The gameplay is a bit floaty, but it's far from awful. The biggest disappointment with it was the lackluster music, which should have been a lot better on this machine. I didn't cover it in detail here because no matter what I tried, I couldn't get it to run properly on anything I had. I hope to cover it at some point in the future. I've had a lot of fun making these Castlevania episodes, and it got me to thinking that we should look at more series the same way. If that appeals to you, let me know down in the comments what you think. I'm Sega X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.